The emperor secretly brought his long-lost love, newly widowed, into the palace and made her a consort. The spoiled and capricious consort by repeatedly summoned the emperor from my chambers. The emperor said, "She's immature. You're the empress, bear with her." I smiled without reply, indulging her as the emperor wished, granting her boundless freedom. My indulgence allowed the dowager consort to stir up resentment throughout the harem, ultimately causing the founding general's elderly daughter, consort Rome, to miscarry. The emperor still declared, "This matter falls upon the empress to bear." I nodded outwardly, yet allowed the old general to seek justice from the iron-blooded empress dowager. Afterward, I patted the crown prince's shoulder. "Come. Let us pay respects to your imperial grandmother and fan the flames. This role of empress, I've grown weary of it. Better to be the empress dowager of the dragon-slaying dynasty. I am the empress of the Zhou dynasty, married to His Majesty for 3 years and bearing him one son." Before entering the palace, my parents admonished me, "The emperor is not yours alone, he is the emperor of all under heaven. As empress, you must possess the magnanimity to accommodate others." Hearing this, I bowed my head, knelt, and performed the full prostration. "Your teachings, mother and father, Yuner dares not forget. Your teachings, I hold close to my heart always." So when His Majesty secretly brought Hu Jingyuan into the palace, I merely turned a blind eye. A month after Hu Jingyuan's arrival, the eldest princess I raised got into an argument with someone. Unaccompanied at the time, she was slapped several times. Had it been a quarrel between princesses, their own concubines could have handled it. But the assailant was a palace servant. Regardless, I must intervene when palace servants bully imperial offspring and have them executed according to protocol. But this particular servant had been brought in by Hu Jingyuan, making the situation rather tricky. For I knew the emperor and Hu Jingyuan shared a deep bond. His Majesty had mentioned more than once in my presence that he had a cousin in his youth who treated him exceptionally well. When he was still an unloved prince, this cousin would often secretly bring him glutinous rice cakes to eat. Alas, she married young. At the time, I offered him comfort, saying fate had its own plans. Little did I expect that as soon as Hu Jingyuan's husband passed away, he brought this widow directly into the palace. After Princess Qing'an was beaten, His Majesty, who hadn't been seen for over half a month, came to see me that very night. "I hear Princess Qing'an was struck. The culprit is a minor eunuch from the attendant's office. I've already apprehended him and will execute him tomorrow. You shall oversee the execution." Before I could utter 3 words, he had already minimized the incident. This minor eunuch from the attendant's office, someone I'd never even met, was to lose his life over Hu Jingyuan. Knowing he wished me to mind my own affairs, I readily agreed. Yet before he departed, I still managed to stop him. "Your Majesty, if you truly care for her, keep her in the palace. When the Empress Dowager returns, formally grant her the title of consort. Dragging this out like this must be unsettling for the lady by your side." The emperor cherished Hu Jingyuan deeply, unwilling even to deal with those close to her. If I seized this opportunity to make a fuss, it would only earn His Majesty's resentment. My 3 years as Empress consort were never about love. Better to go with the flow, grant them their wish, and earn a reputation for virtue and grace. When I arrived at the palace execution ground, I formally met Hu Jingyuan. She sat on a noble consort's couch, eating lychees from the south. The eldest princess also came to witness the execution, her left cheek swollen, eyes filled with hatred as she glared at Hu Jingyuan. When she saw me approach, her expression shifted, her eyes brimming with tears. She looked at me. "Mother." The eldest princess was born to a maid who shared quarters with His Majesty before his ascension. Her mother passed away early, so I raised her from childhood. She treated me like her own mother. "Why is it so badly swollen? Did the imperial physician not prescribe medicine? She clutched my hand, as if wanting to say something, but I shook my head. I had already learned the details of the incident on the way here. It was nothing more than Hu Jingyuan's servant, accustomed to arrogance, mistaking the grand princess for another servant when she saw her alone. After exchanging a few provocative words, the two came to blows. Qingyin was still young and no match for her opponent, so she was grabbed and slapped several times. Long live Her Majesty the Empress! Hu Jingyuan rose to curtsy before me, though her knee bend was unsteady and her waist sagged limply. The gesture felt utterly perfunctory. Who do you think you are? How dare you speak to my mother like that? Qingyin flared up, pointing at her and demanding, Your Majesty. The eldest princess was disrespectful to this humble servant. I did nothing wrong, why is she so enraged? Does being a princess grant one the right to bully others? I chuckled softly. To actually question whether one can bully others within the palace walls, she truly has been sheltered too well. Turning, I looked at the senior palace maid Jiwu beside me. Who is this concubine speaking? How come I've never seen her before? At these words, Hu Jingyuan's face flushed several times. Before she could speak, I continued. But since you've come to witness the punishment, it shows you hold the palace rules in reverence. Let's not delay, carry out the sentence. Two burly eunuchs administered the punishment. They swung the massive execution staff with fierce force, each blow landing on the prone young eunuch, making him cry out in pain. He repeatedly shouted, I'm innocent. Before long, the scene became a bloody carnage. Sitting nearby, Hu Jingyuan's complexion drained gradually. I curved my lips as I heard the eldest princess whisper softly, Mother. It wasn't this man who struck me. Of course I knew. But since His Majesty didn't want to touch Hu Jingyuan's people, I couldn't either. This eunuch who was beaten to death had forced many palace maids to eat with him, hardly an injustice. Before the punishment concluded, Hu Jingyuan covered her mouth and rose. Her eyes darted about before she abruptly turned and vomited onto my robes. The foul, fishy vomit baked under the scorching sun, its stench intensifying. My smile remained unchanged as I waved dismissively. This new consort is witnessing punishment for the first time. Her loss of composure is understandable. Take her away to rest. Before Hu Jingyuan departed, our defiant gazes locked. I offered a faint smile. That evening, the Emperor made a rare visit to me. This Eastern Sea dragon pearl delights me greatly. It suits your chamber splendidly. Do you like it, Yuner? Since Hu Jingyuan entered the palace, he seldom called me Yuner. I offered only a faint smile, refusing to engage. Fu Gong, the eunuch by his side, seized the moment. This dragon pearl is one of a kind. The moment it arrived in the palace, His Majesty brought it here personally. He wouldn't give it to anyone who asked. The key point was, he wouldn't give it to anyone who asked. I accepted the pearl, and the Emperor visibly relaxed. Clearly, he feared I might make Hu Jingyuan suffer for today's events. Yuner, I know you're magnanimous. After I marry Jingyuan, you may discipline her according to protocol. I won't let her overstep her bounds. I took his hand and sat down, resting my head on his shoulder as I had when first entering the palace. The dragon pearl isn't necessary. It's enough for Yuner to know the Emperor holds me dear. The dragon pearl glowed brilliantly in the lamplight, making my complexion appear exceptionally delicate. Unexpectedly, the chamber doors were suddenly knocked upon. The Emperor's attendant stationed with Hu Jingyuan reported that she had developed a high fever from fright and was now delirious, demanding to see His Majesty. He looked at me apologetically. I smiled and shook my head. As I helped him adjust his robes, I took the opportunity to suggest, Your Majesty, the tutor for young Yan has yet to be chosen. What do you think of Chu Ju? The Emperor paused, but under the urging of those outside the door, he nodded. I shall have Fu Lai draft the decree tomorrow. I walked him affectionately to the door. My heart swelled with joy. Chu Ju, a man of distinguished lineage and extraordinary talent. He excelled in the literary examinations, ranking 22nd in the Jiazi class, and commanded troops in the Yan campaigns. Binding him to Yen'er would surely cement the crown prince's position. Yet this incident revealed Hu Jingyuan's standing in the emperor's heart. I knew His Majesty was eager to grant Hu Jingyuan a formal title, but I hadn't imagined he'd be so impatient. Without even going through the motions, he chose a date to confer her the title of consort the very day after Hu Jingyuan recovered. Counting the days, Hu Jingyuan had been in the palace for exactly 40 days. In such a short time, without the status of a noble lady, and having been with His Majesty for but a short while, she became imperial consort solely by virtue of the emperor's favor. Rumors instantly swirled throughout the harem, with some even claiming my position was in jeopardy and the crown prince's succession was about to change hands. I paid none of this any mind. Any discerning person could see where these rumors originated. The truly astute were waiting to see how I would measure up against Consort Li. Conveniently, the day after her investiture, the consorts were scheduled to pay their respects with tea offerings at my cunning palace. The imperial harem, after all, was much like the inner courtyards of ordinary households. Concubines must pay their respects to the principal consort. Consort Li arrived at Cunning Palace, bowed to me with feigned fragility, and offered her greetings. I knew she wouldn't stay quiet. Sure enough, as she presented the tea, she let out a startled cry and the teacup shattered on the floor. Then, as if violently shoved, she stumbled backward and fell to the ground, her knees landing squarely on the scattered shards. Blood gushed forth instantly. Her face drained of color. Her eyes held unspeakable terror as she stammered, "Your Majesty, this was no accident. Why did you order the servants to push me?" She was turning the tables. I stared at her coldly, my expression unchanging. I beckoned Jiwu over. "Go summon eunuch Fu. Have him bring His Majesty to the Cunning Palace. Tell him Consort Li has fallen." Hearing my order to summon the emperor, Consort Li's eyes flashed with triumph. Once most of the palace maids had left the chamber, she whispered to me, "Why must you call the emperor Your Majesty? Summoning him will only make you look more foolish. Isn't the reputation of being jealous enough?" Soon after, the announcement echoed outside, "His Majesty has arrived." Empress Li sat on the floor, refusing to rise, tears splattering onto the ground. Yet the emperor's first action upon entering wasn't to comfort her. Instead, he looked at me helplessly. "Yuner, please don't punish her severely." His tone softened to a plea. "Consort Li treated me with great kindness in her youth. I know you've suffered injustice, but she's new here and knows nothing of these palace intrigues. Unlike you, she spent years outside the palace walls and remains innocent. Still innocent. 25 years of innocence." With those few words, he painted Consort Li as pure as lotus blossoms untouched by mud, while branding me as one of the palace's filthy rags, utterly corrupted by the palace's stench, as if refusing to forgive her were my fault. I stirred the tea leaves in my bowl with a faint smile. "The emperor and I are husband and wife. Those you care for are those I care for. But palace rules are strict, we cannot indulge concubines in their petty schemes. A small punishment serves as a greater warning." Consort Li was stunned. Ignoring the pain in her knees, she scrambled to her feet and grabbed the emperor's robe. "Your Majesty." It was she. The emperor's expression darkened, and he raised his hand to cut her off. "Consort Li, Yuner lost a child years ago because of these very matters. Jiwu was sent by me to protect her." She could never have imagined that Jiwu was the emperor's spy. Hearing this, Consort Li immediately embraced the emperor, her tears falling even more heavily. "Your Majesty, Jingyuan was wrong. Jingyuan only wanted to test whether you value your sister more or me more." Jing Yuan simply loves your majesty too much. Please. Your majesty. Forgive Jing Yuan. Ultimately, unable to bear seeing his beloved beauty weep, the emperor nodded and gently helped her up. I understand your feelings. This shall not happen again. Now, quickly apologize to the empress. Only then did consortly wipe her tears, sniffle, and turn to apologize to me. I sipped my tea to hide the smile tugging at my lips. Consortly is new to the palace and still learning the ways. This matter shall be forgiven. However, palace rules must not be broken. That palace maid showed loyalty to her mistress. I shall grant her the honor of taking her mistress's punishment in the earth's core. I pointed to the palace maid who had accompanied consortly, the very one who had struck the eldest princess that day. The maid immediately knelt, banging her head on the floor in supplication. Consortly shifted her toes slightly, but ultimately let the guards drag the maid away. Half a candle's burn later. Agonized screams pierced the air outside the door. She hesitated to speak, glancing cautiously at the emperor. Seeing his unwavering gaze, she reluctantly fell silent. Only when the screams outside grew piercingly shrill did consortly, her face ashen, finally speak. Thank you, Your Highness, for sparing me. Ignoring her resentful stare, I sipped my tea. You're welcome. Just mind your place in the palace and serve His Majesty well. By the time she exited, the palace maid from that day had already breathed her last. I am fiercely protective of my own. Anyone who dares harm my child must face my wrath. The next day after court, just as Yenner finished his studies, the emperor joined us. The three of us could finally share a meal. This had become a long-standing habit. Every so often, we would gather together. Like any ordinary family, we chat about recent events and share heartfelt confidences. I noticed the flowers blooming beautifully in the palace lately. It's been ages since the Jade Forest banquet, and the palace has felt quiet. Perhaps we could host a flower viewing banquet. His Majesty loves lively gatherings, so this suggestion was right up his alley. Yenner is still young, smiling as he watched us two enthusiastically discuss the flower banquet. But just as the topic began, I saw Eunuch Fu rush in, whispering something into the emperor's ear. The emperor's expression changed abruptly, from initial delight to panic, then disarray, before finally returning to joy. Clearly, Hu Jingyuan was stirring trouble again. Sure enough, the emperor rose immediately, unable to finish his meal, unable to hide the smile on his face. He fondly ruffled Yenner's hair. Yenner, consortly is feeling nauseous and vomiting. I'll go check on her. Turning to me and the child, his expression shifted to one of guilt. Jingyuan is so inconsiderate. You are the empress. Bear with her. So that's what it was, she was with child. Hearing his words, I immediately clasped the emperor's hand in joy. Consortly bearing an heir to the throne is truly cause for celebration. Wait, Your Majesty. I'll accompany you to offer my congratulations. Shi Wu. Fetch my jade carving of auspicious clouds. Seeing my excitement, His Majesty could not refuse. Our entire entourage bustled toward Consort Li's cherry blossom hall. Only Yenner, I sent him back with the wet nurse. When we arrived at the cherry blossom hall, Hu Jingyuan sat listlessly on the bed, her lips pale. Upon seeing the emperor, her first act wasn't to pay respects, but to retch. The emperor halted in his tracks. I sighed softly, stepping past him to support her. This woman was playing the victim, unaware the emperor prized cleanliness above all. Sister, with such severe morning sickness, has the Imperial Medical Office prescribed pickled plums? Seeing the emperor's reaction, Hu Jingyuan understood she'd made herself unwelcome. Sniffling, she replied, They have. Thank you for your concern, sister. After we spoke for a while, the emperor approached from behind, placing a hand on Hu Jinyuan's back in gentle reassurance. Rest well, sister. I shan't disturb you and His Majesty. With that, I tactfully withdrew from the cherry blossom hall. For her to announce her pregnancy at this precise moment, she must have ulterior motives. I had intended to avoid provoking her. Yet her schemes unfold in relentless succession. If I cannot discern her ambition for the Empress Dowager's position, I might as well relinquish my own crown. Sure enough, shortly after returning to the cunning palace, an imperial edict arrived. By the mandate of heaven, Consort Li, virtuous and gracious, has conceived the imperial heir. Her merit shall be rewarded. The Empress, gentle and obedient, serves as a model for the harem. Yet, the Empress has been overburdened lately and may struggle to host the flower viewing banquet alone. Therefore, Consort Li is hereby granted the privilege to assist. So decreed. The edict was utter nonsense. I lowered my eyes and smiled as I received the decree, slipping a lump of gold into Eunuch Fu's hand under his sympathetic gaze. Thank you for your service, Eunuch Fu. His face instantly lit up with joy. Your Highness, you've worked hard. Consort Li has been favored greatly lately. It would be wise to avoid the limelight for now. I thanked him for the advice and instructed Jiwu to see him off. That evening, I resolved to seek an audience with His Majesty. Seated across from him, I made no mention of the flower viewing banquet. We simply finished our meal as usual, laughing and chatting about past matters. Yet Consort Li sent word again. This was the third time. The Emperor, unusually, grew angry. What's the rush? Consort Li is only 2 months pregnant. Could she possibly give birth in a single day? Once we were alone, he shed his anger, his voice tinged with shame. Consort Li has a childish streak. But without him, I might not have lived to adulthood. Today she said she feared boredom during her pregnancy and wished to assist you. So I arranged the flower viewing banquet for her. It gives you a chance to rest. His hand closed around mine. These years have been hard on you. With help, you deserve some comfort. I gently pushed his hand away, tears welling in my eyes. Yenner has missed His Majesty terribly. He couldn't even finish his meal today. The Emperor sighed. Perhaps we should invite your elder brother's son to keep Yenner company. He could serve as a study companion. I straightened his robes, smiling softly as I bowed my head. My elder brother is the Grand General of the nation. His son is exceptionally talented. But more importantly, he shares our bloodline. Yenner would naturally benefit immensely from more contact with him. Upon leaving the Emperor's hall, I encountered Consort Li. She had shed her earlier pretense of indisposition. Lifting her chin haughtily as she declared, I shall host the flower viewing banquet splendidly. His Majesty promised me that if I handle this well, I shall oversee the entire harem henceforth. Your Highness need only await your blessings. I had witnessed this arrogant demeanor more than once. Most recently, I saw it reflected in the face of the palace maid trailing behind Hu Jinyuan. After hearing Eunuch Fu's words, I chose to avoid confrontation for the moment. I entrusted the entire flower viewing banquet to the consorts to handle. However, since Consort Li lacked experience, I delegated some authority to Consort Rong, with whom I shared a close bond. The flower viewing banquet was a plum assignment, executed well. It could win hearts and secure imperial favor. Consort Rong took it very seriously. Yet within days, she came to me with reddened eyes. Your Majesty, I cannot manage the banquet. I beg your punishment. I gently wiped her tears, knowing full well what lay beneath. What is it? I asked. Consort Li seized this opportunity to rally the palace attendants and consorts. The entire Star Garden had become her personal fiefdom. These people knew best how to curry favor with the powerful. No matter how I pleaded, I couldn't persuade the servants to cooperate. Wiping her tears, she continued. The banquet provisions were supposedly managed by the imperial kitchen, but she found every excuse to replace the staff there for her own gain. I couldn't intervene at all, so it was better to just step back. She wasn't just upset for herself, she was indignant on my behalf too. From the start, Consort Li sought to seize my authority. She paid no heed even to Consort Rome's repeated attempts to intervene. It was a blatant attempt to sideline me. Beyond that, she relentlessly harassed my people, seemingly seeking revenge for that day I had her palace maid executed. Besides Consort Rong, the one most severely affected was Grand Eunuch Rui of Yonghe Palace. Defying all opposition, she had him flogged 20 times and expelled from the palace. This Grand Eunuch Rui appeared to be my man, handling affairs for other consorts in Yonghe Palace. But in truth, he was the Empress Dowager's man. The Empress Dowager had left the palace 3 years prior to pray for the well-being of the retired emperor and had yet to return. Naturally, I took charge of her former subordinates, including Eunuch Rui, to manage the multitude of consorts and servants in Yonghe Palace while maintaining its pristine order. Free from any hint of corruption, he clearly possessed considerable skill. My repeated attempts to win Eunuch Rui over had failed. Yet now he was abruptly expelled from the palace by Consort Li. What baffles me is why Consort Li would target him. After much inquiry, I learned it was simply because he refused her request to wear brocade from the south on the day she entered the palace. He stated it was reserved for the empress. This single, strictly official remark was interpreted by Consort Li as an insult. She even regarded Eunuch Rui as my man, daring not to confront me directly. Now that she's gained power, she naturally seeks to torment the servant. I patted Consort Rong's shoulder, now that she bears the imperial heir and I've lost His Majesty's favor. Someone must share his affection. Who do you think he'll choose? She lifted her eyes to meet mine, biting her lip as she asked, "Could His Majesty come to me? It's been so long since I've seen His Majesty. Who else could it be but you? In this harem, it's only natural that a child would be most welcome." Consort Rong's body trembled. As our eyes met, I knew she understood my meaning. To balance the harem and stabilize the court, the emperor would choose a consort to share his bed who was of equal standing to my family. This person would ideally also bear him an heir. That person could only be Consort Rong. After dealing with Eunuch Rui, and with the emperor not visiting my palace for so long, rumors of my imminent dismissal grew louder by the day. The meals in Cunning Palace grew colder. The daily flowers were clearly leftovers from other selections. And even the brocade robes meant for me vanished without a trace. Perhaps the rumors were too convincing, for even my own family began to waver. When my nephew was brought into the palace that day, my sister-in-law stopped by to see me. "Yuner, how have you been?" I heard them say. "Someone in the harem has gained the emperor's exclusive favor?" I smiled as I explained, but she still clasped my hand. "Your brother is here too. If you've truly suffered any injustice, don't endure it silently. My brother is here." "Yes. But he's in the imperial study discussing state affairs with His Majesty." I reassured my sister-in-law repeatedly, telling her I was doing well, even receiving fresh flowers daily. She stroked my hand and whispered, "Our Yuner didn't marry into the imperial family to suffer wrongs. I know you don't want me to worry, but when your eldest brother comes later, you must tell him." I reiterated that the matter was entirely fabricated. Unexpectedly, before I could finish, His Majesty arrived, accompanied by my eldest brother. My brother's face was dark. He looked at me, opened his mouth, but ultimately sat down at the emperor's invitation. "Since Yu Zhang is here, let us dine together." The emperor addressed my brother by his courtesy name, clearly intending to keep him. My brother and sister-in-law had just wanted to see how I'd been lately, so they readily agreed. "What would you like to eat? I'll have the kitchen prepare it." As I greeted my brother and sister-in-law, His Majesty said, Just have the imperial kitchen send what they're serving. Have them add 2 extra dishes. Jiwu went to inform the imperial kitchen. But no matter how long they waited, not a single dish arrived. The emperor and my brother's expressions began to darken. Especially my brother's. He looked at me, words on the tip of his tongue, just as both were about to lose their temper. The dishes arrived. Jiwu and several palace maids arranged them on the table. Counting them, they were still the same dishes as before. Weren't 2 extra dishes supposed to be added? Where are those 2? His Majesty inquired softly. Jiwu bowed her head. This servant does not know. But the imperial kitchen was indeed informed. I urged them to eat, perhaps they were too busy to remember. With the flower viewing banquet approaching, the imperial kitchen has been quite occupied. Hearing this, the group finally picked up their chopsticks to eat. The food served had already been tested for poison by eunuchs. So, as usual, the emperor began eating first before we followed. But the moment the emperor lifted a forkful of bean sprouts to his mouth, he grimaced and angrily slammed his chopsticks down. Summoned the head steward of the imperial kitchen. Seeing this, my brother disregarded court etiquette and likewise picked up a pair of chopsticks. So this is what our empress has been eating. Those bean sprouts were spoiled. I smelled it the moment they were brought in. The head steward of the imperial kitchen arrived. A eunuch I hadn't seen before. Despite the emperor's fury, the man remained clueless when questioned and was immediately dragged away to be thrown into the dungeon. The emperor could only turn his wrath upon Jiwu. I sent you to protect the empress. Why did you not report this to me? A plate of food crashed before Jiwu. Kneeling on the floor, she trembled as she replied, Her Majesty said such trivial matters should not trouble your Majesty. With your Majesty's heavy responsibilities, it was not appropriate to concern you. Now, all eyes shifted to me. I grasped the emperor's arm. Your Majesty, please. These days have been too hectic. This is the first time. There's no need to be angry over such a thing. Yet the angriest was my elder brother. He said nothing, only stared fixedly at the emperor, his eyes brimming with fury. The emperor turned to look at him, then at me, his eyes filled with stern resolve. The day I ascended the throne, I promised you I would never let you or the children suffer again. If I cannot even protect my own wife, what kind of emperor am I? This matter shall not be discussed further. I shall investigate it personally. Even if it was only to placate my brother, the emperor would see it through. Moreover, the vow he made years ago to marry me was still vivid in his mind. With any sense of responsibility, he would see this matter through to its conclusion. Consort Li remained unaware of this affair, still dreaming of ascending to the position of empress. Recently, however, her pregnancy had become noticeable, and she had repeatedly declined to attend to the emperor's bedchamber for the sake of the child. His Majesty was, after all, a man, and needed some form of release. After seeing Consort Roan dressed in her finery several times in my palace, His Majesty couldn't help but be tempted. Your Majesty's affection is deep, but I've been unwell lately and cannot attend to your bedchamber. I pressed my hand to my forehead, feigning illness. If it were before, perhaps I could have managed. But now the sight of His Majesty makes me feel sick. I don't need to bear another child to compete for favor with Yenner. The best solution is to push him away. Yenner, do not speak thus. It is I who have failed you. Rest well, I shall visit tomorrow. With that, he hurried off after Consort Roan. Consort Roan had truly put in the effort, successfully keeping His Majesty by her side. For several days in a row, she appeared radiant and full of springtime charm. Before the flower viewing banquet even began, she was diagnosed with a pregnancy pulse. I brought gifts to congratulate her. Consort Roan smiled, stroking her belly. Thank you, sister. The harem feels so lonely. Having a child for company is truly wonderful. I placed the longevity lock in her hand. As I lowered my gaze, I warned her to be wary of consort Li. She's foolish and jealous. This child came to you with such difficulty. Don't let her find a way to exploit you. She nodded cautiously. I expected consort Li to scheme subtly. But she didn't even think twice. She stormed straight into consort Rong's chambers looking for trouble. By the time I learned of it, consort Rong had already been punished to kneel under the scorching sun for an hour. The reason? She dared to speak back to the imperial consort. I rushed over just as a wet nurse emerged from the chambers carrying a basin of crimson blood. Poor consort Rong, her child, barely months in the womb, was lost. His Majesty knew, yet merely paid a visit to offer hollow words of comfort, bestowed some tonics, and then left without a second thought. When I went to see her, consort Rong struggled to rise from her bed, burying her face in my embrace and weeping. Mentioning consort Li, she gritted her teeth. The flower viewing banquet is coming soon. My father will be there. Please, Your Highness, tell him the truth. I patted her back. Rest assured, I will never allow any consort in the harem to suffer injustice. Fortunately, the flower viewing banquet was only 2 days away. This day was a grand affair, with all officials of the 5th rank and above entering the palace accompanied by their families. Consort Li sat to the emperor's left, draped in a crimson brocade gown with subtle patterns trailing to the floor, her head crowned with a heavy gold diadem, her face radiant with smiles. It felt less like a flower viewing banquet and more like a wedding day. By comparison, I appeared even more subdued, clad only in a moon-white Qiuji gown, my hair held back by a single jade phoenix hairpin. As gazes turned my way, the distance made it impossible to distinguish which woman was the empress. Ministers seated closer already frowned. Whispers of favor the concubine, neglect the wife reached my ears. The founding general, seated nearest the emperor, flashed an unpleased expression at our brief exchange. He was consort Rong's father, no doubt he'd noticed her absence. Yet the old general didn't erupt on the spot. Instead, he sent a note to me and waited in a garden corner. Why didn't Rong come? Straight to the point. I didn't hide it. Consort Rong was punished with 2 hours of kneeling the day before yesterday. She suffered a miscarriage and couldn't attend today. The creaking of knuckles echoed from the old general's hand. He forced a nod, suppressing his anger. Thank you for informing me, Your Highness. Returning to the banquet, I saw the emperor's smile had vanished. Our dynasty upholds the highest standards of integrity. Censors and advisors abound. Consort Li's current behavior clearly leaves her open to criticism. No doubt someone will impeach consort Li before the emperor at tomorrow's court session. But with the old general involved now, this process might not be too far off. Yet before the old general could react, an incident erupted at the flower viewing banquet. First, the eldest son of the Minister of War began vomiting and suffering diarrhea. Soon after, the women at the banquet showed the same symptoms. Even I was not spared and returned to the palace early. That night, I heard the emperor flew into a rage, demanding consort Li explain herself before everyone. It turned out consort Li had long since replaced the imperial kitchen staff with her own maids and eunuchs. These people had never managed the kitchen before, they only knew how to bicker and vie for attention in her presence. By the day before the flower viewing banquet, the imperial kitchen hadn't finalized the menu, and no one had even inspected the food. This was the cause of the mass food poisoning at the banquet. Thus, the embezzlement of food supplies from my palace was also exposed. My elder brother leapt from his seat, demanding justice from His Majesty. The emperor immediately struck consort Li across the face, knocking her to the ground. He then ordered precious restorative medicines and imperial physicians to be sent down, barely quelling the minister's fury. Amid the chaos, consort Li was escorted away. When punishment was meted out, the emperor merely shifted blame onto the servants, executing a large number of kitchen staff. Consort Li, however, received only 3 months of house arrest. For Consort Li, one crisis barely subsided before another arose. Eunuch Fu, who remained by the emperor's side, told me that after the flower-viewing banquet ended, the old general approached the emperor as the gathering was winding down. He asked only one question, "Your Majesty, why did Rongrong not come tonight?" The emperor smiled, intending to dismiss him as usual. "Consort Rong is unwell and did not attend today." The old general stroked his beard and departed in silence. The next day, Consort Rong's letter arrived at the general's residence. During court proceedings, the old general petitioned the emperor to punish the consort. The imperial court erupted in uproar. The emperor attempted to invoke past precedents, citing Consort Li's care for him during his youth. But Consort Rong was the general's only daughter, and though aged, the general's influence remained formidable. Thus, when the general spoke, countless censors followed suit, submitting memorials. Yet the emperor remained as stubborn as an ox, refusing to budge. Returning to the palace, he sought me out. This had become routine. The emperor often consulted me on matters. I was sipping tea in the hall when Eunuch Rui, a veteran of the palace, entered. His skill in preparing tea and pastries was truly first-rate. "If your Majesty finds them to your liking, this humble servant will prepare more." It was after tasting my tea and pastries that Empress Dowager Xiaozhou elevated me to my current position. Eunuch Rui had served in the imperial kitchen and was the chief eunuch of Yonghe Palace. Consort Li believed she had long controlled the harem. But in truth, several of her people were Rui's confidants. I felt confident in trusting him with the flower-viewing banquet arrangements. Indeed, he handled it splendidly. When His Majesty entered, he saw Eunuch Rui limping as he attended to me. "What has happened to this little Rui?" I was changing His Majesty's robes, and the discarded dragon robe was left in the cunning palace. He committed some misdeeds recently and was punished by Consort Li. Initially, they planned to expel him from the palace, but seeing he was an elder from the Empress Dowager's service, I felt some reluctance. His Majesty's brow furrowed deeply. "Consort Li again. Is this how she manages palace affairs? As Empress, why cannot you properly oversee the 6 palaces?" I lowered my gaze and murmured a response, pausing my movements, which drew his attention. When I looked up again, my eyes were brimming with tears. "Your Majesty, I know you work tirelessly. It is my fault. I beg your punishment." He was stunned. I rarely show weakness. Such tactics are reserved for the most critical moments. "It is I who have been biased. You are not to blame. Eunuch, you still manage the 6 palaces most competently. Consort Li is confined to her quarters, and you have rested enough. It is fitting that you handle the affairs of the harem." I sneered inwardly. So Consort Li had made a mistake, and now I was expected to clean up her mess. Did she even consider whether those she'd offended would agree? Tears welling in my eyes, I nodded. The emperor, clearly uncomfortable, found an excuse and left. "Yenner, did you see that? When you become emperor, never let a woman cloud your judgment." Yenner emerged from behind the screen and nodded solemnly. For several consecutive days at court, the old general demanded punishment for the consort. His Majesty refused to budge. But I knew his resolve was already wavering. Consort Li had committed so many transgressions that her childhood kindness could never atone for them. After repeated tug-of-war, the old general has grown utterly disillusioned with His Majesty. That night, as my nephew departed, I had him deliver a letter to his sister-in-law. The next morning in court, the old general was indeed absent. It turned out that witnessing the emperor fiercely defend Consort Li, the old general flew into such a rage that he spurred his horse straight to Luhong Temple to seek the Empress Dowager. I knew full well the Empress Dowager's ruthless ways. Had it not been for her, The emperor's ascension to the throne might never have happened. So I patted my eldest son, Yennefer, on the shoulder and glanced unobtrusively at the dragon robe. Come. Let's pay our respects to your imperial grandmother and fan the flames. The day Empress Dowager Xiaoxiao returned to the palace coincided with Consort Li's release. She seemed to sense her good fortune had run its course. For the emperor hadn't even visited her. Trembling with fear, she sought me out. I was teaching Yennefer calligraphy at the time. Seeing Hu Jingyuan arrive, I dismissed Yennefer. She immediately knelt before me, Your Highness. I beg you. Let me leave the palace. I know the Empress Dowager is returning. In my years caring for His Majesty, I may have no merit, but I endured hardship. Were it not for me, you would not hold your position today. I beg you. Save Jingyuan. I shook my head and ordered Eunuch Rui to drag her away. At the sight of Eunuch Rui, Consort Li's face drained of color. Consort Li, please leave. She fled in a panic. Just then, the Empress Dowager's palanquin arrived. Who is this? The Dowager lowered her gaze. Eunuch Rui happened to see me and informed me. I hurried out of the hall to greet them. Your Majesty, this is the newly appointed Imperial Consort Li, whom His Majesty has brought into the palace. I replied. I hear she has erred. Since this concubine is unknown to me, her rank shall not stand. Yet, since the emperor favors her, she may retain her title. She shall remain in the stargazing courtyard as a palace maid. Consort Li instantly collapsed as if her bones had been shattered. Kneeling on the ground. Your Highness, you do not remember me. If not for me, how could His Majesty have survived until now? Spotting the emperor approaching from afar, Consort Li crawled over and clung desperately to his trouser leg. Your Majesty, Jingyuan erred. But Jingyuan was merely too fearful of not surviving long in this palace. The Empress Dowager's lips curled. Not surviving long? Who would harm you? Or do you think the harem under this palace and the Empress's rule is utterly chaotic? At this, even the Emperor's expression darkened. Your Majesty, this consort of yours is quite the lively one, capable of slandering this Empress Dowager above and framing other consorts below. Truly, you've found yourself a fine woman. I stepped forward to support the Empress Dowager. Auntie, please calm your anger. Eunuch Rui has prepared tea and pastries. After your long journey, come to Cunning Palace to have some tea and cool your temper. She cast a faint glance at the emperor before turning to leave. Consort Li struggled desperately, screaming frantically in the Empress Dowager's retreating back, I have a child. I carry the emperor's child. Without turning her head, the Empress Dowager waved dismissively behind her, abort it. A child of such a woman must not be kept. Clinging affectionately to her, he called out, Grandmother. Yennefer was 7 now. At the most adorable age. I saw the Empress Dowager's expression soften slightly. She stroked Yennefer's head tenderly, then looked at me with a meaningful expression. The Crown Prince has been raised exceptionally well by you. I smiled and brushed the matter aside. But I knew the Empress Dowager had already lost hope in the Emperor. A ruler obsessed with beauty was ultimately unreliable. Thus, 3 years later, before her passing, the Empress Dowager entrusted all her connections within the palace to Yennefer. The Empress Dowager was my aunt, and Yennefer was her own grandson. She was bound to aid me and Yennefer. With the support of the junior tutor and my elder brother, Yennefer and I grew more powerful by the day. As for the Emperor, his body had long been hollowed out by sensual indulgence. Within a few years, he could no longer hold on. The last time I saw him, he lay on his bed, his cheeks sunken, his eyes vacant. He was still murmuring my name. Your Majesty, do you remember Consort Li? I leaned close to his ear. His cloudy eyes shifted twice, and his dark purple lips trembled slightly, as if to say, I remember. That day, I recalled how, in the early years when my aunt held no power, our family, desperate to keep her and her child alive, had arranged for a girl with access to the imperial harem to bring them food. Our family hailed from Jiangnan, where glutinous rice cakes were our tradition. Never did it occur to you why Consort Li would send you rice cakes while residing in the capital? His eyes widened, as if trying to see something clearly. How pitiful. He believed Consort Li to be a pure-hearted soul, when in truth she was merely fulfilling a request. I closed his eyes with my own hands, then departed unhurriedly before instructing eunuch Rui to announce the imperial decree. In the end, this realm has become ours, mine and my son's. The end.